Hello, everyone. I'm Kimberly Guilfoyle, along with Juan Williams, Jesse Waters, Katie Pavlich, and Greg Gutfeld. It's 5 o'clock in New York City, and this is The Five. Major developments in the heated national debate on immigration. President Trump signing an executive order which will keep migrant families together in detention centers. The president explaining why he's taking action.
We're signing an executive order I consider to be a very important executive order. It's about keeping families together while at the same time being sure that we have a very powerful, very strong border, and border security will be equal, if not greater, than previously. We're keeping families together, and this will solve that problem. At the same time, we are keeping a very powerful border, and it continues to be a zero tolerance. We have zero tolerance for people that enter our country illegally.
The big question remains, is it legal? The courts have said children cannot be detained for longer than 20 days with the adults. All right, Greg, we start with you. Obviously, this has been a pretty hot-button issue, a lot of discussion back and forth from both sides, and everyone obviously cares about families and about children, and no one wants to see children harmed. And now you see the president engaging in executive action to try to address some of the concerns, valid concerns that people have.
Yeah, I think everybody... The problem with this issue has always been that everybody agrees the separation issue is bad. The problem is nobody had a solution. Nobody was offering solutions. They were offering a lot of anger and rage. Over time, though, you start seeing these ideas bubble up. What are you going to do? What are you going to do? My worry is, I worry about the intensity of anger and division that I saw this week as we got to this point. We have to admit that there's a torrent of rage that is out of proportion to the scenario. And don't say, oh, when you say that, you don't care. I do care. I said this was a problem. But I do think, I worry about this outrage that foments insurrection without coming up with a solution. We had I think it was 9 people killed in Chicago over the weekend. But I've never seen this kind of rage about anything. And I think you should also be aware that when we start talking about facilities and housing, this will not satisfy the people that are the loudest voices. They will not be satisfied. If it's a military base, they're going to say, how dare you put those children among soldiers carrying weapons? It's like a FEMA camp with those, I think you're going to expect more outrage, a different kind of outrage, because it seems to be working. But I want to reiterate, we all care, but caring isn't enough. You need solutions. And the problem that has always been with this story is that while the separation issue is real, the idea that half the country is demonic and bigoted is a delusion. And the more that you push that delusion, the more precarious this country, the situation this country is in. If you blame half the country because you don't like their stance on immigration and you call them Nazis, that is dangerous. That's very dangerous. We're talking about 2,000 kids. We want to solve this problem. We're all there. Let's see what happens. This may not work out, but people are trying.
Okay, people are trying. So it's a step definitely in the right direction. It's a very difficult issue that many administrations have tried to tackle, the issue of immigration, and trying to be compassionate, be understanding about families, but still respect, the rule of law.
And you can't get to a place of compassion or empathy when you are accusing Border Patrol agents and ICE agents of being Nazis who are participating in tactics that were used in Nazi Germany. I mean, there's nowhere to start there. And the emotion has been so hot on this issue, as it has been in the past on issues of illegal immigration. This is nothing new. We can't really get to the truth of the problem here. The executive order is a good idea. Politically, it looks better for the president, considering the polling on this is bad. Ted Cruz introduced legislation, but it doesn't address the key issue here, which is why are parents separated, not parents, adults. And I use the word adults very specifically, because why are adults separated from children? Because in recent years, we've seen an exponential increase in smugglers pairing stranger adults, with children and smuggling them to the border. And there is no way for agents to prove they're actually parents of these children that they're showing up with. And in the past, they've come to the border knowing if they show up with a child, they'll just be released. So the difference here is that they're not being released. But the problem also moving forward is you can't win. You had Kamala Harris tweeting after President Trump signed this executive order saying, well, this executive order is not enough now, even though parents and children are going to be detained in the same location. They can't be detained indefinitely. So they've moved the goalposts here on what is allowed. And their solution is to simply let them go into the interior of the country, which is exactly why we're in the position we are today. It's why we were there in 2014, and we'll be there again in the future at this emotional state, probably even hotter if it continues this way without some solution about the problem of the unaccompanied minors or parents, adults who are coming here illegally with children.
Yes. Okay, Jesse, obviously you should be concerned as well if you have a child coming in with someone who is not their parents or not their guardian or a legal relative. That child is in harm's way. And then there would be outrage as well on the other side to say, oh my goodness, look what you've done because you left this child with this individual who's now caused harm to the child. God forbid a rape, a murder, or something like that happens. You do have a responsibility to properly identify and match a child to a parental relative, a guardian, et cetera.
Right. Obama's policy was meant to be pro-family and ended up being pro-smuggler, because when you saw this policy come into position, you'd had a surge of people from fake families. And that's when the coyotes and the cartels profit. And still, this president kind of created a solution, because there's no false choice between being strong on the border now and pro-family. He's this is a silver bullet, but, it still could get challenged. You never know what's going to happen. He wanted Congress to solve it. Congress didn't step up to the plate. Cruz had a standalone bill. Chuck Schumer said, I don't want to touch it. We want to keep this alive. And if you watch cable news today, some of these anchors kind of upset that the president solved the problem, because it seemed like they want to keep this story alive, which is really sick. I think the Democrats hurt themselves more on this issue than President Trump. President Trump looks like a man of action. He looks like he's compassionate. He has heart. And the do-nothing Democrats sat around and whined and complained and did absolutely nothing, like typical congressmen. So the media also lied about it. I mean, the media said from the jump, this was President Trump's policy. And now, when he comes out with an executive order, the Washington Post and the New York Times say, oh, you know what? This violates the 1997 court settlement that limits how long you can keep a child in confinement, and says this goes against the Ninth Circuit court ruling. So which one is it? You can't have it both ways, New York Times and Washington Post. So, hopefully Congress can step in and eventually do something, because this will be challenged in court. But right now, I guess it's a, smart solution, but you never know how it's going to play out.
Juan, so the president had to step in with some, decisive action and leadership, because, Congress hasn't exactly been winning on this issue in terms of putting forward some positive, good solutions and results. So now you have a situation where the left is still upset, even though they were calling for the president to act, he's acted, and now they're still saying that there's an issue.
I don't think it's just the left that's upset. I think a lot of people are upset by this and very emotional about it. And you see people ranging from Laura Bush to Arnold Schwarzenegger. I could go on. In fact, Mitch McConnell today said the majority of the Republican caucus in the Senate was ready to propose legislation to end this policy. And what you see is that President Trump, who said, oh, it's not a policy, it's something I did, it's something the Democrats did. Oh, guess what? He just signed a policy today, an executive order that ended it. So sounds to me like we know who lied here. It was the president.
Not true.
He said it was the Democrats' fault. It wasn't Democrats' fault. It was his policy, and he undid his policy because he was losing. You think about it for a second. The Wall Street Journal editorial page today said, this is costing Republicans heading into the midterms. It is that detrimental. You think about the fact that right now, 67% of Americans say this is unacceptable. Most Republicans, I think it's like 39 to 34, said unacceptable. In terms of independence, 2/3 of independent voters said this is unacceptable. So President Trump reacted to the real politics here that were hurting him and hurting Republicans heading ahead of the midterms. When he talks about infestation, animals, criminals, he's dehumanizing immigrants. But when it comes to children, I think lots of Americans say this has gone too far. And, you know, he says, oh, it's the Democrats' fault, or I don't have a policy. That's what Homeland Secretary Nielsen said. We don't have a policy. Oh, well, guess what? Today, the president signed an order undoing his policy.
You don't see human sex trafficking a problem that you have to get the kids separated from people who aren't their actual guardians?
That's a secondary, maybe even
It's the
tertiary. I don't.
It's not a
numbers.
tertiary
The numbers are
key
disturbing.
issue here is-
so child sex trafficking is a tertiary issue. Good to know, Juan.
To this, the key issue here is
Not
separating children.
2,000
from
children.
And
From adults.
Americans are very clear on this, although you might want to obfuscate and complicate the issue to try
I'm
to
not.
take away from children being separated from their
I'm
parents.
bringing up
Can I just
a
say
real
real fast?
problem.
Katie, there has to be a determination as to who is legitimately with a proper parent or guardian, who isn't. It would be
Right.
reckless and essentially committing another crime against an innocent child to not do so. It would
Yeah.
be
Chuck
completely out
Grassley
of
wrote a
line.
letter to ICE in 2016, of April 2016, saying we have seen an exponential increase in smugglers pairing unrelated adults with unrelated children, taking them to the border, and then using them, by the way, when they get to the United States for sex trafficking, for child labor. So it absolutely is a huge #1 priority that is completely being swallowed up in all of the emotional arguments here. And when it comes down to solving this problem, they still, in this executive order, have to prove, according to the order, that the child is related to the adult. It is very, very difficult to do that.
So, Katie, you know, the thing is, I am sensitive to this argument because I don't think child labor is good, and I don't think certainly sex trafficking is an abomination. So I would listen, but the fact is
What would
that
make you
wasn't
happy,
hang
though?
on, please. But that was not what was raised by the administration. They said this is part of a zero tolerance policy that's going to de-incentivize people crossing the border. But we have seen it didn't have that effect.
This is not a policy one. This is the consequences that we saw this week and over the last couple of weeks are a consequence of people breaking the law. They have changed it now so children can be detained with adults in these centers together. But when you talk about the issues of what Kirstjen Nielsen, the Homeland Security Secretary, said on Monday, they are concerned about the well-being of these children because it is a liability for them when they are in their custody to make sure that they are not being abused, which is why they separate them.
But again, that's not what was said by the president.
That's what, right? Answer my question, which is what would make you happy? What do you think is a good outcome here? Because you're
You
quarreling
cannot-
with what the president has done.
I want to hear the solution. I'm dying for
Dying
it.
to hear it
The
too.
solution was obvious. That's what the president did. He ended that policy and said that you keep parents and children together.
Okay.
And
So
you
you're
don't.
happy.
Well, I am
Adults,
happy
you're
that he did
happy.
it, but I'm saying how many lies were told in defense of this indefensible
Okay,
policy?
Juan, the
my
New York
gosh.
Times reported that there's laws and court decisions on the books
On
that
20
say
days.
what you can do when a minor crosses the border.
Right.
You can't hold them indefinitely.
Correct. That's what I
And
said.
you can't just, you also have to give them a hearing when they claim asylum.
Correct.
So that's
So-
one of the reasons if you have a zero tolerance policy, that you can't just keep migrant camps of people, of minors and adults together.
So who changed the policy?
Can I,
Jesse?
There still is a
Who changed the
zero
policy?
tolerance
Oh, I
policy
see.
at the border.
Trump changed
No, no,
the policy, and now you're
They're
saying
still not allowing them to do catch and release.
They're still getting prosecuted.
So it's
Jesse.
tough on the border and pro-family.
that
now.
has nothing
And
to
children
do
are
with the
separated.
You know
central
what? They're
issue
still
of
going to challenge
separating.
this in court.
Yes,
And children
And
are
that's why he
separated.
wanted Congress to do it. He didn't,
Oh.
he didn't
Right.
do an
Imagine-
executive order
imagine-
because that's not the way you do
Imagine-
immigration.
imagine how
But
much I would like
all right,
Congress
guys,
to do
there's other
something.
people
Greg,
here.
Greg,
There's other
real
people
quick.
here. Whenever
We see
you
you,
have
Greg. I can see
Democrats
you.
talking about gun control, what do they talk about? Closing the loopholes. Everybody's obsessed with closing the loophole. Where there are laws, there are loopholes. There was a loophole here in the immigration system, a broken system. We admit it's a broken system. The loophole allowed bad actors to take advantage of it by smuggling kids in to farms and for sex trafficking. This is a part of it, Juan. And the whole point is we're just like liberals. We want to close the loopholes. Why do you have a problem with closing a loophole? I also want to your point. You made a really good point about Grassley. Rob Portman was on top of this 3 years ago. Because he's from Ohio, where these poor kids end up at these labor farms. Republicans were on this years ago, but for some reason, no one cared. Why is that?
But people do care.
Now, because President Trump.
What people
There's an
care
election
about is
coming up.
President Trump separating children from parents. That's the issue.
You're at step one,
And they're
Juan. Get to step two.
And they're separated from adults who are facing pending criminal charges or are suspected of trafficking.
Step one
Do you
is
get
saying
that?
separation
That's
is wrong.
protecting
Step two is
children.
the
Go
solution.
through a port of entry.
Yeah, all right.
three-card
An
monte.
outrageous attack against the president's 12-year-old son. Greg explains next. Stay with us.
Tuesday, the violent group Antifa tweeted out identities and locations of over 1,500 immigration and customs agents, and not to send them Christmas cards. This is called doxing, when you spread someone's personal info so others can harass them. The justification, clearly, these agents are evil, so why not? Are you surprised? Not when the media's loudest voices describe America as the Third Reich, making these agents the stormtroopers. Soledad O'Brien just tweeted, I guess we put to rest the question, Nazi Germany, could it happen here in America? On Twitter, actor Peter Fonda, do you remember him? Barely. Instructed the world to target the agents by surrounding their kids' schools and scaring the F out of them. Fonda also called for kidnapping Barron Trump to be put in a cage with pedophiles. That tweet got over 1,000 likes. He also called for Kristen Nielsen to be stripped naked and whipped. That got nearly 700 likes. Viva the resistance. So outrage minus any solution creates a bloodthirst, targeting Americans trying to solve a problem that the loudest voices never cared about until now. But a simple Google search going a few years back will find terrible tales of child sex and labor trafficking, smugglers tricking kids into a life of enslavement. Is that the alternative you'd want for 125,000 unaccompanied minors who've come to America since 2011 from Guatemala, Honduras, and El Salvador? I got that stat from a Washington Post 2016 article when President Obama was in charge, back when Peter Fonda and the rest didn't seem to mind. All right, since I wrote that beautiful monologue, thank you very much, America. Peter Fonda has since apologized, claiming about the Barron Trump thing. I went too far, it was wrong, and I should have done it. I believe he issued an apology because the Secret Service contacted him because he had broken a series of laws for threatening a family member of the president with kidnapping, number one, and bodily harm, which is, he was insinuating rape. Raping the child.
I mean, when the left is comparing Republicans to Nazis, yet they're the ones that are fantasizing about child rape, assassinations, and beheadings, it doesn't make a lot of sense. And to, remember Jane Fonda? Jane Fonda posed on the top of North Vietnamese tanks, and then Peter said, "Hold my beer."
Yes,
Watch
exactly.
Watch what I do to the president's son. The whole thing's sickening, and I know we talked about this before, but the left and the media, they threw a tantrum. They threw a tantrum, offered no solutions, and when the person came in and created a solution, they still don't know what to do with themselves. They're going to go on to the next disaster and try to call the next person Hitler or call the next person Nazi. It doesn't matter what this president does. They did it with the travel ban. They did it almost every policy. He's been compared to Hitler. I'm just curious to see what's going to be next.
And they eliminated any positive feedback for North Korea. Kimberly, it strikes me as strange that the same people who resent calling MS-13 animals have no problem calling people stormtroopers and Nazis.
No, I know, and I just want to address the Peter Fonda issue. I think it's particularly repulsive. It's reprehensible. I don't care that he apologized. Sorry isn't good enough. To say that a 12-year-old boy should be put in a cage with pedophiles so that he could be raped is absolutely disgusting. And this is an individual. It's just vile to even see his picture there. To say that to a child, I'm a mother of an 11-year-old, and for someone to say that for another child, for that to happen to them, it's really sickening when you see the level of depravity of the left when they behave, and Hollywood, in a way like this, to the point where Melania Trump had to call Secret Service to make sure to get this investigated because it's a real threat. When people see stuff like this, it's dangerous for a child to say something. I had this happen, Greg, when I had people going viral, when I had this whole Snoop Dogg and Bow Wow thing.
Right.
And people came after my son, who's 11, and did the exact same thing, and it was horrific. And this has to stop, and it's grossly irresponsible. And I don't even know why Sony would ever even put a movie out with a guy like this in it. He should literally never
won't
work
anymore.
again. Why would they?
Oh, I don't know.
There should
There'll
be
be
some
people-
consequences.
There'll be
for
people
this
in
kind
Hollywood
of
who will
conduct.
see him as a hero.
Maybe Michael Moore.
The same, yeah, exactly. You might get a TV show out of it, Katie.
Yeah.
Is he still on Twitter, by the way?
I haven't checked.
Because like,
I did notice he deleted those
deleted
tweets.
Yes,
Because I
yes,
went to
yes.
try and find them, and I couldn't find
Well,
them.
because underneath it, then there was all these calls for other members of the Trump family and for children,
Oh,
and
yeah.
they're going to come for that child. And, you know, this is the problem with the environment and dangerous environment it creates.
Yeah, it's the initial statement which he made, and I think he actually meant it. And then the mob that came to back him up on the statement is, I think, even more terrifying than the initial thing of what he said. This is a guy who has praised Roman Polanski, so I guess I'm not surprised this would be something that he would want to say. But this doesn't bring us any closer to a real solution about people's lives who are in danger, whether it's people in America whose families have been ripped apart by illegal immigration crime through drunk driving or murder, or whether it's parents who have sent their kids up with smugglers to the border through this harrowing journey, who are now stuck in this place where they don't know where they're going to go. Are they going to be put into a labor situation where they owe a smuggler a labor debt? Because that is a real thing. We don't know. And so this kind of language is horrific. It's awful. It has real life consequences.
Yes.
And there are people's lives right now, today, who depend on real solutions coming from Washington, D.C. and their local communities. And this guy isn't doing anything but making the situation worse.
Juan, I'm not even going to ask you to defend this. I know you found it disgusting.
No, I mean, to me, it was a poorly worded tweet, offensive language used. But what strikes me from this very conversation is you guys delight in it because, again, it takes away from the
Delight in
fact.
it?
No,
Yeah, you delight in it because it takes away from the conversation focusing on what President Trump did that is antithetical to American values,
So
to
that
family
justifies it.
values,
Good.
to separating a 4-year-old, imagine, 3-4-year-old in bed,
Now
not
you're
knowing
diverting.
where his or her parents are, and you're saying, oh, well, that's not the issue. The
these are
issue is some
totally-
Hollywood celebrity acting like a fool. What's the foolishness is people are saying the president did something here, Republicans, Democrats, Independents, that is just abhorrent
And
to
that
who we are
justifies
as an
this
American
behavior.
people.
Yes,
Got it.
it
Got
doesn't.
No, I
yeah,
didn't
it
say it
doesn't
justified.
You definitely
No.
are defending it.
No, what I said
You're
was you're
defending it.
delighting in it because it gives
Nope.
you an opportunity
accuse
to
me of
change the
delighting.
conversation.
It's my job to write
from
monologues.
What is
You
the
and the
central
left
issue?
was delighting in this story because
Oh,
to
gosh.
distract from IG
Listen.
and the
Oh, my
Singapore
gosh.
summit.
I wanna
You
take-
guys
no, I
can
wanna
go
take
on
issue
and on
with
with
the-
the team
hold on.
sports stuff, but this is
This
the
isn't
reality.
team sports. This
God.
is about the safety and protection of children.
Yes, it is,
what
and
this
that's why
about.
the
And
president's policy is so
What Peter
unpopular.
Fonda did is indefensible, and there are two totally
nobody's
separate.
defending it, but
two
why
to-
celebrate
well,
it?
I thought you
you
just
said
did.
it was just poorly worded. It
Poorly
calls
worded.
for a
Terrible.
criminal
That's-
sexual
I just said
act
that.
by sexual predator.
I guess Mein Kampf is
against
poorly
a
worded.
child. That's
No,
not.
this is
that's
to
not
me.
poorly
This is
worded.
not the issue.
All right.
But you choose to focus on it because it gets you away.
Yeah, that's
from
it.
Your
No.
own
You're
problem.
mind
No,
reading,
you just said
Juan.
it was
You're mind
poorly
reading
worded.
again. Get your crystal ball. That's not what I'm thinking. A top congressman making a disturbing new allegation that could deal a huge blow to the Clinton email and Russia investigations. Stay with us.
A stunning new claim about more potential FBI misconduct in the Clinton email and Russia investigations. Congressman Mark Meadows raising serious concerns about witness reports during yesterday's hearing on the IG report.
The other thing that I would ask you to look into, there is growing evidence that 302s were edited and changed. And it gets back to what Ms. Handel said in terms of those particular interview sessions. And those 302s, it is suggested that they were changed to either prosecute or not prosecute individuals, and that is very troubling.
The president's lawyer, Rudy Giuliani, also weighing in on the bias at the Bureau.
We believe there may be two of the people with similar biases expressed in text that are presently working on the investigation. If that's the case, then how can you trust anything they're doing in this investigation?
And after Peter Strzok volunteered to testify before Congress, House Judiciary Chairman Bob Goodlatte is warning the anti-Trump FBI agent to agree to testify next week because he says a subpoena is coming. So, Kimberly, not only did FBI agents juice these interviews with some of these people like Mike Flynn, some of these anti-Trump FBI guys ended up on the Mueller team, aside from the people we know like Peter Strzok.
Sure.
The hits keep coming.
Yeah, well, there can be no fairness where there is inherent bias like this. And this has been really demonstrably proven here in this particular case. So you have people who have been compromised, who've been removed from an investigation. So how is it? It's like fruit of the poisonous tree. How can you trust anything when they were part and parcel of that investigation, and then you're going to trust the byproducts of that investigation, that there was some kind of impartiality or fairness in the process, when you've seen now the bias, there's actual evidence of it in the text messages, and then the altering of the FD 302 forms, which actually are entered into evidence during proceedings. They are actual legal documents that comprise sort of the notes of interviews, et cetera. So when you have somebody admit that they've altered those documents, any of those particular 302s that were proffered by people like McCabe, et cetera, in other cases, those investigations have been compromised as well. So this is really like fraught with legal problems, implications in terms of any of the ongoing investigations, including the Mueller probe that's been going on and on forever, like years of Christmas past. And now you have this revelation coming forward, and two additional agents that show bias and that we're anti-Trump. So this is the big revelation coming out of all of this, is saying, wait a second, that's why the president is saying this is something, this proves his point, and this is a witch hunt against him, et cetera, and you have all these people that were really out to get him. And can you imagine, we're actually talking about the FBI.
And one of the people most out to get him, Peter Strzok, may come in and testify in Congress as soon as next week. Juan, how do you feel about your good friend Peter up on Capitol Hill?
Now he's my pal.
Yeah, he is.
You know what?
That's
I think
called
Peter Strzok has said.
testifying.
He's had a long time to get his story straight.
I think Peter Strzok says he's glad to testify. He wants to testify, so I don't see that there's an issue here. To me, this issue is about the president and his, his surrogates making the case that somehow the FBI and the Comey investigation and Robert Mueller as the special counsel are not to be trusted. Anything that's found out about President Trump, just ignore it, America, because guess what? Peter Strzok said he doesn't like President Trump and doesn't want him elected. Imagine that. How many Americans could say the same thing? How many people go about then doing their job? And in fact, what the Inspector General found was there was no evidence that the job was done in any biased manner. But the larger point here is, if anybody has a complaint, it's Hillary Clinton. Because guess what? That's what Comey did. He came out and made an announcement that tremendously hurt her chances, not only in June, but then subsequently 10 days before the election. Recently, she said she deserved an apology. He says no. That's the real fight. Yeah. And now President Trump tries to jump in and say, hey, I can get off of this too. I'll tell my supporters this thing is a total witch hunt. What did Giuliani say? Now we should investigate the investigators. How ridiculous is that?
Well,
you know what's ridiculous?
The General is investigating the investigator.
Yeah, so it's not that ridiculous.
Job.
Right.
Yeah, we have an Michael Horowitz's entire job is investigating and holding accountable the investigators. So
yeah,
it's not a foreign. It's not a foreign. Right, it's not a foreign concept to look into why decisions were made and whether they were made under the guise of ethical behavior, which, by the way, he said it wasn't during his testimony this week. But my favorite thing about the Peter Strzok statement from his attorney is that they're now concerned that this investigation into him has been tainted with political bias and that he's going to be treated unfairly. Imagine how it is when you're a witness in an FBI case or a subject of an investigation and you know that the people in charge have the same biases.
You know, Greg, if someone locked you up and you found out that police officer hated the Gutfeld monologues and hated Fox News, you'd scratch your head and you think, maybe the fix was in.
Well, it raises the question, what proof of bias do you need beyond the investigator saying, I'm stopping Trump? I mean, what do you need? Do you need an actual plan, a Nancy Kerrigan-styled, attack? Do you need that? I mean, imagine if the left had an email from Trump that said, call Putin. We must stop Hillary. I think they would call that bias. But I'm honestly,
They're still looking for that.
I picked the wrong time for a summer vacation. Because this story is like the most boring form of tug of war. We never get anywhere, and we keep going over the same ground.
No, we're winning, Greg.
But the only change in this story is Trey Gowdy's facial hair.
Well, you know how I know it was biased, Juan? It's because all of Hillary's people, they destroyed evidence, lied to the FBI, they all got immunity, and then Trump's guy gets a date wrong, and they're going to lock him up for a year.
And real quick, Cernovich reported this back in February that it was altered, the 302 of the interview of General Flynn, so that McCabe, Strzok, all of them. Well, that was reported, and now we know that is true. So this is a totally comparably compromised investigation.
President Trump today says, oh, you know what? Maybe Flynn didn't lie. Now remember, Flynn has pled guilty to lying, America.
Yeah,
but the
'cause they
president
were
said,
about to
oh,
lock his
maybe
son up.
not.
Right.
Oh my God, this is making your head
based
blow
on
up.
fraudulent information and a
Oh, my
compromised
God.
investigation.
Why
So
did he
see
plead
what-
guilty?
See what happens with that. Yeah,
Yeah,
right.
Juan, you usually defend people that plead guilty. A troubling trend is developing for Nancy Pelosi. How concerned should she be? Find out next.
You saw the masterpiece. She looks a lot like you. Wrapping her left arm around your right, ready to walk you.
You gotta feel it.
Is Nancy Pelosi's popularity problem putting her in peril? Politico reporting at least 20 Democratic House candidates say they will not support her bid for Speaker if the blue wave sweeps the Democrats back into power in November. So let me ask you, Jesse, what do you make of this?
I mean, I'm just reading Pelosi put out a statement on Trump's executive order, and she blasts it. She says this paves the way for long-term incarceration of children.
There you go.
In prison. So he can't win. He's either separating families or imprisoning children. But this is politics. I would say that the Republicans aren't running away from Donald Trump, but Democrats are running away from Nancy Pelosi. And that kind of shows you the state of politics right now. It's a center-right country, and the president is more in touch with the average person than Nancy.
Well, what do you think?
I think this shows that Bernie Sanders may have lost the battle, but he's going to win the war. Because this is the Bernie Sanders part of the party, the younger people who are running for office, the young millennials who support Democrats saying, we no longer want the establishment in power. Nancy Pelosi has been facing a coup for a long time. And maybe, if Democrats take the House, which right now is looking more unlikely by the day, but if she does, finally we may see that she goes away in terms of her power that she's had for far too long.
Greg, I think she said it doesn't matter to her if you have the Connor Lambs, the young man who won in a red district, Pennsylvania 18, a Democrat. And he said, you know what, I'm not going to vote for her. And her response, that's fine, as long as Democrats win.
Yeah, it's very hard. A lot of politicians won't leave until you show them the door. It's on both sides, by the way. But Dems have made it into a lifelong career, and Bernie is a perfect example. I don't know if he's ever held a real job.
Nope.
But we're elevating politicians above real work. And I think the saddest part, and I'm a broken record, she should do a walking tour of San Francisco. It's no longer this precious jewel. It makes the Dirty Harry era look serene. It has gone from bucolic to bubonic. When you look when you look at these shanty towns and the disease that's being spread and the feces, and I'm going to go through it. Good, because I love California.
Tell
And
the
so do you,
truth here.
Kimberly.
I love
She's
California.
betrayed it.
Hello, I left San Francisco and
Yeah.
it was in very good shape, and it's very
Yeah.
upsetting to me to see what's happened now because
It's rich people
really upsetting.
and people suffering. That's all it is.
It's just it's a very like bipolar in terms of the divide there and what the areas that are nice, the areas that are not, and it's shameful. 'cause
So let
it
me
used to be
ask
one
you
of the
this. Let me
most
put it to you
beautiful
this way,
places.
Kimberly.
Yes.
60% of registered voters
I
told
would like
the
to
Washington-
disclose that I used to be related. Nancy Pelosi.
60% of voters told the Washington Post in April it's no importance to them if a candidate supports or opposes Pelosi. But I'm thinking to myself, most voters don't like Congress. They have a negative perception of Pelosi, of Paul Ryan, of Mitch McConnell.
Sure.
So what difference does this make if some people say, I wouldn't vote for Pelosi? Doesn't that just take away the potential for Republican ads that would link them to Pelosi?
Well, right. I mean, it's a problem for the party because she's the head of it. So when you have like record disapproval for, Congress, and this is the person that's been heading it up for the whole time. Hello. Yes, they're saying, listen, no mas, no mas. So none of the Democrats, they don't want this. They're going to go hard left. People like, yes, Elizabeth Warren, Kamala Harris, Bernie Sanders. That's the future and the face of the Democratic
so they go
Party.
farther to the left.
Yeah, absolutely.
Oh, I
They're going to
see.
go even farther to the
So
left.
maybe the Republicans now would like
Just
Nancy
like the whole
Pelosi.
California delegate, they're not.
All
She's
right.
the
A
failed policy
refreshing
of the
take
past.
from Hollywood.
I just.
God is real. God loves you. God wants the best for you.
The speech everyone's talking about, that's next on The Five.
Well, we are used to seeing Hollywood stars at award shows attacking President Trump and pushing a liberal political agenda. But an A-list actor, Chris Pratt, is making headlines for a powerful and inspiring message to his fans while accepting the Generation Award at the MTV Movie and TV Awards.
God is real. God loves you. God wants the best for you. Believe that. Learn to pray. It's easy, and it's so good for your soul. People are going to tell you you're perfect just the way you are. You're not. You are imperfect. You always will be, but there is a powerful force that designed you that way.
Greg, pretty brave.
It's refreshing. However, the real story is that these awards still exist, and that MTV still exists, because I used to live for this stuff and live tweet it. I didn't even know this was on. MTV is now as irrelevant as a man bun.
Aw. Jesse, your thoughts?
I think Hollywood stripped his award after the show because he was so insulting. I mean, I would just say that he's brave, but we get away with this stuff if you're a good-looking leading man in Hollywood. You can get away with anything. He's a heartthrob. He can say anything.
But Kimberly, what about his advice? He went to accept this award and gave 9 pieces of really good advice. You know, learning to pray, it's an easy thing to do. Saying that you're not a perfect person, you have to improve in life and grow. I mean, it seems like that is contrary to a lot of what we hear at all these other award shows.
Absolutely, and I thought this was very refreshing. And so he's not only dreamy, he's inspirational. It's Megan Albano's our producer, celebrity crush. I just outed her.
Oh, man.
Well, I thought
did
I
out
was.
you. No, it's not you, definitely. Pretty sure about that. Yeah, you're on the super freaky list, but not on the heartthrob list. But this is nice to see, you know, and it's good for children and young people to see as well, and for adults. And when you look at the juxtaposition of someone like Chris Pratt versus this Peter Fonda, absolute, just disgusting human being, it's refreshing to see there's a few nice people in Hollywood that are classy and not afraid to embrace their faith.
One, different than the Tonys and Robert De Niro yelling the F word.
Well, I just think this is, to me, the real news here is, you know, you get somebody up on the stage who says, you know, God is real, God is important, prayer is real, grace is real. To me, these are Christian values. You know, I guess the difficulty of people say, why are you proselytizing, using this pulpit in a way that's not about Hollywood, not about awards. But I guess you guys are excited because he didn't say something anti-Trump, am I right?
I'm just excited that he said something different than what we hear in this droning on unoriginal thought at these award ceremonies.
We have a leading man right here. I don't hear praise of God every day from Jesse, right?
I mean, I say it every day once I leave the set.
Thank God I'm not it.
And
Imagine what I say.
He says everything. Every time
We can't repeat what you say, Juan.
All right, one more thing. Up next.
Juan.
Well, I've been gone for a few days to attend my son's wedding. It was a blast, folks. And I brought back some pictures of Raffi and Morgan. Here's their magic moment, exchanging rings with Father CJ. Here they are walking down the aisle as Mr. and Mrs. And here's the two during their first dance. And here's a shot overlooking the Mount Holyoke Mountains. They look like models. And here's a happy couple with some old folks. You know them. Congratulations to Raffi and Morgan. Well wishes to you both.
Very sweet. Congratulations to them. They have a happy and blessed marriage and life. It's very sweet, Juan. And in little baby news, look at these little hilarious photos, and it proves that kids and, well, self-tanning lotion probably shouldn't mix together. So 2 Scotland moms took to Facebook to show what happened when the kids decided to tend to their summer glow. This is why I don't do it on myself, because it could be really problematic. This is 2-year-old Kyle and his 3-year-old friend Leo. They cover themselves from head to toe in this tanning lotion, and it's instant tanning lotion, so trust me, this is problematic, while the moms' backs were turned. But they were having a little play date, and can you imagine, of all things for them to get into? But
Thank God it was tanning lotion.
Yes, exactly. Okay, Jess.
Life imitating art. A man with a gun tattooed on his forehead arrested for unlawfully possessing a gun. This guy in South Carolina tossed a revolver in some tall grass after a car wreck. Not even allowed to be having a firearm, not even allowed to be driving a car. And I mean, what a beautiful piece of work that guy is.
Yeah. Talk about self-fulfilling.
Okay.
All right, my podcast is with the great Walter Kern.